So obviously the chapter starts off with Angel hitting the maximum output Jacob's ladder, even though technically later on we find out that it's not actually maximum output Jacob's ladder, because Angel is completely unable to bring out the full extent of her power. One, because she's missing an arm, which I think is an interesting note, talking about things, the interesting little tidbit facts that we get from the chapter. It's interesting that Sukuna mentions that Angel's output is lacking. One, because obviously they're coexisting, which means that Angel isn't in full power of control. Second, she's missing an arm, which apparently that affects your cursed technique or cursed energy output, because that happened to Naobito as well. At least it affected his speed when he fought Jogo. I thought, missing an arm was just because, he didn't have the same body type, which affected the way that he used projection sorcery and, used his speed. But apparently just being limbless affects your cursed energy output just in a general sense. Again, it's still unclear why, people like Inumaki, who apparently was drawn with both arms in the one panel we saw him in. But even if Inumaki, it was just a mistake and Inumaki's missing an arm still, Hikari gets his arm back. So again, I don't know why Angel's arm wasn't able to be healed. My argument always was that Sukuna did soul damage, but people have I wouldn't say debunked, but people have argued against that. Yeah, so maximum output Jacob's ladder because Angel isn't in tip-top condition. Sukuna, instead of, as we kind of talked about in chat, doing anything, dynamic, using some kind of binding vow or really pulling out any kind of BS to use against Angel, he decides that, all right, well, this won't kill me right away. I'm going to bear the brunt of the technique, climb Jacob's ladder, which I think is peak symbolism, by the way. It's been mentioned so many times in the comment section and in multiple different things that Sukuna climbing Jacob's ladder is definitely a fairly interesting, little thing to say, oh, haha, he did that. I mean, Jacob's ladder as a whole is meant to be the ladder to heaven. It's meant to be he's climbing his way into heaven. So with the way that this chapter ends, I mean, that could be an even harder nail that's going in the coffin. But I do got to give props for everyone that always talks shit about, Binding Vow Merchant over here, King of Curses himself. I want to give him credit. Instead of using some kind of BS tactic, he decided to use the Chris Redfield tactic of smashing your giant fist into the ground, throwing all of that debris up, and then deciding to just air step on the debris and catch Angel that way. Which, I mean, is pretty athletic. The parkour is pretty insane. Yeah, I know a lot of people are upset about this because I'll just go right out and say it. Angel and Hana, this is the character that got wasted. Everyone throws shade at Yuki. Everyone throws shade at Kashimo. Angel's the character that's getting assassinated here. Let's be completely honest here. We were introduced to Angel over almost 100 chapters ago, and she was supposed to be this huge, big character that had this cursed technique that was supposed to be unbeatable. No one was able to withstand it. And now, Hana fumbled the first time. You can give her that, and my defense has always been it was Hana's fault, not Angel's. Hana was just too love crazy for Megami. But, I mean, I just have to assume, and Sukuna does say that, oh, it's all because of, your weak vessel. I just have to tell you, I think they both share equal accountability of blame of this situation here now. I can't even defend them at this point. We went from, I mean, Sukuna does admit the previous Jacob's Ladder was great and could have ended the story here, but Hana wanted to fumble. And what happens here? We get this big Joker card, this final last Hail Mary. Hana has a chance to redeem herself, and it literally amounts to flies buzzing around Sukuna that he has to basically look through a cloud of flies to try and fight her and kill her, which is just, damn, Hana, you had one job and you couldn't even do that. You couldn't even do that. Todo has to take this Black Flash for you, which I think is just insane. At the same time as I can talk all this smack about Angel, I can give all the glaze in the world to the true Jujutsu sorcerer, Aoi Todo, the man that even Sukuna thinks to call by his real name. in this chapter, which is just beautiful. Just beautiful. For all the hatred that we can give to Angel and Hana. And the reason why I say hatred, and people are like, oh, you're harsh on this character. I have rode for this character. I have tried my best to make this character make sense, and maybe they'll come back and maybe they'll have a big moment in the end. And I have been forced to put clown makeup on myself for trying to defend this person. I've always said they're a fumbler. I've always said they're a fraud, but I gave them a chance. I gave them a second chance, and I'm regretful for doing it. Todo, on the other hand, has closed every single time. ABC, always be closing. This man takes a second Black Flash from the king of fucking curses and lives to tell the tale. The only other character that has done that is Maki Zenin. The character who's supposed to be a durable speedster, is known for their steel-like, insanely powerful, you know, vitality and everything like that. And here you got Todo, just your normal guy with a fucking instrument fucking stapled to his wrists. And look at this, he tanks a Black Flash from Sukuna of all people. I love it. I absolutely love it. And again, Todo might be one of the only people to get glazed by Sukuna and live. Sure, Maki is technically alive as far as we know. I have to assume that she's alive, but it's possible Gege could flip the cards on us and say that everyone that was in the domain did die. I hope not. I would love Maki to be alive. Maybe not so much Miwa, but Maki. And yeah, it's just gotta give Todo his props here. Gotta give Todo his props here. So those are definitely important aspects to the chapter besides just Yuji's domain expansion. Angel still sucks. I'm sorry that I ever tried to stand behind her and, you know, rally her up and act like this what might have been her big moment. It wasn't. My bad, guys. Will never be doing that again. I don't care if we get a third arc, if we get a Jujutsu Kaisen 2, and she spent the last 10-20 years training to become this all-powerful sorcerer. The moment she gets into this next big moment for her, if there ever is one, because we're probably approaching the end of the story, I will not support her. I will be supporting whoever is on the other side. I don't care how dastardly, how evil, how awful of a person they are. I will be wearing their jersey when they're playing against Angel. That's just how it is. Todo, on the other hand, continues being one of the greatest characters ever conceived by Gege Akutami. I have nothing bad to say about Todo whatsoever. The fact that he stood up for this fumbler, it's just, and again, you know what? That's just what happens when you defend people like this. Cut them off. Cut the snake off at the head. Let the body disintegrate. You just gotta, you gotta see. Now we brought Todo down with her, and next we get into the Yuji section of the chapter, which, clutching my pearls here, I have to tell you, this is Yuji's story. I promise you, this is Yuji's story. It always has been his story. It always will be his story. There's never a moment where I have doubted Yuji. Yuji climbs Jacob's ladder with Sukuna. Again, symbolism is not lost on me, especially if Yuji's domain expansion ends up being this self-sacrificial deed where him and Sukuna actually both take the train down to hell together, as opposed to Yuji just soul dismantling Sukuna can't miss lethal hit attack that separates him fully from Megami entirely. Yuji and Sukuna both climb Jacob's ladder in this chapter today. And of course we get the funny little, even in serious crazy chapters like this, Gege can't help himself. So both Sukuna and Yuji were able to bear the brunt of Jacob's ladder. Yuji follows Sukuna into the abyss, starts swinging at Sukuna, grabbing him by the ankles, smashing him through buildings. He's dismantling the fucking walls, the fucking floors, the ceilings. He's doing so much to put pressure on Sukuna. They're both fighting back now. However, Sukuna, because he did unfortunately just Black Flash the ever-living shit out of Todo, that can't be denied. I will say I give Todo props for surviving the Black Flash, but he did still get Black Flashed. And at this point, I think Yuji is still holding more Black Flashes than Sukuna. I think Yuji's at like 8 or 9. Sukuna might be nearing that same amount. He gets his reverse curse technique back, so now he is fighting against 4-arm Sukuna. Even though Yuji's got experience in the 4-arm fight domain against the Grasshopper, we have to remember that this is Sukuna here. So yeah, Sukuna does start taking full advantage of the forearms, starts hitting Yuji, starts taking a handicap in battle, dodging all of his hits. And honestly, if you ask me, it's this page right here that really solidified it for me that Sukuna is cooked. It's here where Yuji's still fighting, Yuji's throwing his dismantles out more and more to try and hit Sukuna. Sukuna acknowledges that Yuji is no threat to my life. As long as I keep fighting this guy on hand-to-hand grounds, I'll regain my curse technique back, cast domain expansion, and everyone's dead. Yuji is not going to be able to kill me. I don't have to take any risky moves like Gojo did against me, where you have to, if you remember, as soon as Gojo got reverse curse technique back, he jumped in and started using blue, red, used the unlimited hollow and everything like that to try and kill Sukuna before he lost more ground in the fight. Sukuna up against Yuji does not have to put in that same amount of effort. He can just kind of coast until he gets his curse technique back. He makes the dumbest mistake you could ever possibly make if you are in a shonen story, a western story, a non-shonen anime, manga, any kind of story whatsoever. You set yourself up for the irony kill, bro. The dismantle that only targets the barrier between Maya and Fushiguro Megami's souls is a lethal technique to an incarnated type like myself. But then, if it doesn't land, it's meaningless. And like clockwork, you know, poetic fucking justice. You couldn't be more ironic here. We get one of the most effective uses of a flashback. I mean, Gege is always good at timing flashbacks. I'll never not give him that, you know, I'll never not give him that glaze, you know, that compliment. Going all the way back to like chapter 11 or 12, whenever Gojo fought Jogo, I don't remember exactly which chapter, I think it's around there. But going all the way back to Gojo versus Jogo, the very first time we ever saw a domain expansion, is just chef's kiss, Gege. The main character of the story, the character who has been curse techniqueless for 200 something chapters. Left, right, good night, designated hands only merchant. Not only did he gain blood manipulation, not only did he gain soul dismantle, not only was he chosen by the Black Sparks, my man Yuji got a domain expansion, the pinnacle of Jujutsu sorcery that even the likes of his mentor Nanami could never reach. And it's just beautiful that whether it's Yuji, the narrator, or God himself coming down to the heavens to remember the very keen moment that Gojo introduced domains and why they were so integral to sorcerer battle. Not only do you get stat boosts and buffs and a perfect domain like a video game, all techniques that are employed inside of a domain expansion are guaranteed to hit. And by fucking golly, what a gorgeous transition into Yuji telling Sukuna to fuck right off twice, 2 times, with both fingers up here, hitting that domain expansion. Only what I have to assume is less than a second after Sukuna realized what the fuck was up. It's been a long journey. 264 chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen. So long of Yuji getting pushed down, shoved, not taken seriously, said Gojo's a better main character than Yuji, Yuta's a better main character than Yuji. Well, it's time to shut everyone the fuck up right now, baby. Now, we don't get a name for the domain expansion. Inside of Yuji's domain, if we're to assume it's Yuji's domain, right? This could be the inside of domain expansion. This could be the afterlife, similar to Gojo's end. We'll have to wait. That's another thing we'll have to wait until next week to see. But Sukuna is just as surprised as we are. He has no idea what this is. He is shook. Absolutely shook. Now, I know a lot of people say that, you know, the innate technique has to make sense. So maybe it has to be soul dismantle. In which case, the world bisecting cleave killed Gojo on a cliffhanger. The world bisecting cleave sent Gojo to the afterlife on a plane to the heavens. Or it's possible Yuji's domain expansion, the soul bisecting cleave, does the same thing to Sukuna, slices him right down the middle beyond recovery to a point where he's going on a train into the underground to hell. Now, it's possible this is also a self-sacrifice, as Yuji is smiling at Sukuna, telling him, hey, let's go together, Sukuna, you and me both. Is this Yuji and Sukuna walking into the afterlife together because Sukuna has no one around him to see him off like Gojo did? Is this the start of Yuji's domain, where Yuji and Sukuna are locked in, pitched combat in this, final train station to hell? Just like opening 1 of Jujutsu Kaisen, where Yuji and Sukuna are on the train together? Are they going to talk no jutsu and come to agreement and both pass on into the afterlife together? I don't know. But all I know is I'm super duper locked in to see what the heck is going on. Yuji's domain is one of the most hyped things in the entire world. And it makes sense. I know one of the biggest criticisms I've seen is that this is an ass pull, or I don't really think it is. I think Yuji having and understanding barrier techniques through soul swapping with Kusakabe, as well as the fact that Yuji also soul swapped with Yuta, I think we can pretty much confirm that it makes sense for Yuji to not only understand barrier techniques. I mean, he was able to employ his own simple domain. So it would make sense to me that Yuji could domain expansion. Why did Yuji not domain all of this time? If it's just a soul bisecting dismantle or soul bisecting cleave that could have been used at any time to take Sukuna down, it is weird why Yuji wouldn't have just domained from the beginning. However, if it's a self-sacrificial move where Yuji is walking to hell with Sukuna, they're both perishing together, and this is how Yuji sends off and goes out, it makes sense why, just as everyone was upset with Yuta taking over Gojo's body and fighting against it to only be used as a last resort, it makes sense that Yuji also giving up his life to seal Sukuna inside of him and they both walk to hell together. It makes sense why that would also be a final page, a final plan, a final last resort thing that can only happen at the end where Yuji gives up his life, similar to Yuta. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens next chapter.